So for the tier list today, the categories are a little different. You'll notice that there are a lot of C categories because of the fact that running backs tend to group around average. So we're going to do the same thing we did last week, which is we're going to start in the middle. Mike's going to give his tiers. Derrik and I will do a little commentary on when we think teams should move up and down. And we're going to start with the C and go down, and then we'll go back up and do the best teams.
And C stands for committee, because when I was putting teams in C's, I was trying to put just the committees together, and then you get a C plus or a C minus if I think it's a good committee. Committee. We're going to start with the Miami Dolphins, who have a brand new committee full of running backs they acquired this offseason.
Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert, and Sony Michel, plus Myles Gaskin, who's still there from last year.
Excitingly average. A lot of quantity, okay, quality.
I at least can appreciate that they all have very different qualities, right? Like Edmonds can be a little bit more of a space and catch guy. Sony Michel is obviously more of like we just need somebody to eat first and 10 carries. And then Raheem Mostert is like more of just if you can get him going in a straight line, he's gone. So I'm not necessarily that high on any of them. Even like Chase Edmonds, I think last year really benefited from the way they used James Conner to be like the main workhorse in Arizona. So I at least appreciate that they can all do different things. I'm just not sure any of them are that great, which I mean is probably fitting if you're a C tier team.
I'll put another C tier team out there, the New York Jets. A committee featuring Michael Carter, who looked pretty good last year, and now featuring rookie Breece Hall.
Yeah, who, I mean, we, had a great backcast projection, but until we see him do it in the NFL, C works for me.
I think if Hall is as good as he's projected to be, or at least as good as I think he could be, this is like a C plus, maybe even like B team, because I actually am really high on Michael Carter too. But again, like you don't know exactly how these guys are going to look. So I don't know. You're basically going off of Michael Carter and like whatever carries you think Tevin Coleman might get, which is meaningless.
Up next for the most committee-like of the committees, the Seattle Seahawks and their 73-piece drum corps of mid-round running backs that they have acquired over the years and decades.
Well, higher than mid-round. I mean, they used a freaking first on Rashad Penny and a second on Kenneth Walker. They just play like they're mid-round.
I know Chris Carson, I believe his career is over. I think he's still on the roster technically.
Right. I might up this if we thought Carson was going to play again. But I mean, I know we're not projecting Carson to play this year in the Kubiak projections.
I think it's probably fine with me because like I think Penny is actually kind of good. It's just that he's never healthy enough to like be good for a long time.
Right.
So that's kind of tough to project. And then again, they have a rookie like Breece Hall. They have obviously Kenneth Walker. So they're just a weird group to project.
There is a couple of these are about potential. Jacksonville Jaguars make the C tier based on the potential when you get Travis Etienne back, and you've got Robinson there, who has played well in the past. But that's it. It's potentially a decent committee.
And it's just a health issue, I think. I mean, Etienne's obviously coming off of missing the entire season. And then even, James Robinson is coming off of not having finished the year healthy. So I think they're both good players if they can play. And they're both super complimentary of each other. Etienne's obviously like a space guy, really good catching the ball, really good. He's fast. Robinson more of a thumper. But like, you just don't know what these guys are going to look like until they play again. Speaking
of health issues, the Baltimore Ravens count as a C to me. And this might be a little high right now. But you have the full group of J.K. Robbins, who I think we've seen as a talented back. Gus Edwards. They brought in Mike Davis, who was this weird Falcons binky guy. I know you guys might be higher on him than I am.
I mean, he was good with the Panthers 2 years ago, and then he was lousy with the Falcons last year.
I felt like he was good for like 4 games. Like had 4 hot games and then was
He's probably better than Latavius Murray at this point. I mean, they want to give that work to Dobbins and Edwards. They want Dobbins and Edwards to be healthy and be the guys.
And they got Tyler Batty in there, who I kind of liked in the draft. They had Justice Hill, I liked a couple of years ago coming out. He's always hurt. And I threw Patrick Ricard. Remember, they've got a fullback they used a lot in there. So I don't know if you guys think higher or lower. All the injuries and all the, kind of sort of he was good for half a year just meant C.
I almost might be inclined for C plus because of Ricard, actually, just because he's one of the better fullbacks in the league and they can kind of do a lot of stuff with him. And I think he's a perfect fit for all the, some of the pistol stuff that they do with like moving around H-backs and fullbacks and stuff. So
if we knew definitely that Dobbins and Edwards were healthy and doing what they did 2 years ago, then definitely I would put them higher. But I think we just don't know at this point. I mean, there are other injured guys that I might stand for. So, maybe.
But they also, some of the other injured guys also have like a longer track record. Like Dobbins doesn't have that long of a track record. And even Edwards is like not that impressive. So.
And there's a lot of carries in that offense where, Lamar Jackson is faking off the edge and taking the linebackers with him to a degree. So also in the C tier, and this one, I might think I put them too high. Arizona Cardinals, James Conner, Darrell Williams, Eno Benjamin.
They were shockingly good last year. I mean, Darrell Williams, yes, he was really good because he was in Kansas City, but there were other guys who were with powerful offenses who didn't have numbers as good as Darrell Williams as a receiver. And Conner, his 3.8 yards per carry or whatever it was, is sort of altered by the fact that he had a lot of short yardage carries. And he had a good amount of value last year. So I'm not going to argue to make them higher, but C seems about like, I don't think they should be lower than this.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I might move them higher because I do think Conner is really good. And I think to your point, some of why he was in some ways less efficient than like Chase Edmonds is, to your point, he's the guy who's taking all the carries that suck to take.
Right.
He's really good at that. I mean, he scored a lot of touchdowns. He was really good inside the red zone, short yardage and stuff. It's just that, how closely can Williams like be what Edmonds was for them last year? Because I think Edmonds is probably a better player. I mean, Williams is still good, but I think like they're probably slightly downgrading, so it's hard to move them up a tier, if that makes sense.
Edmonds was 10th in success rate last year. He was very high in DER, and it really was. Here's a high percentage carry, and it went to Edmonds, and now here's grunt work, and it went to Conner a lot of times.
A lot of times, yeah, which got Conner a lot of fantasy value because of touchdowns, but yeah.
We have the New England Patriots coming up the rear here with their long list of committee backs.
I'm not happy to be arguing for the Patriots running backs. I would much rather have J.C. Jackson on the Patriots than argue whether the Patriots should be a C with running backs. But I do think with James White back, and given how good Harris and Stevenson were last year with a rookie quarterback, so that, they were going up against defenses that were clearly playing the run, I would put the Patriots a little higher.
I think I kind of agree, though, because I think both Harris and Stevenson can be like, 20 carry type of backs, just in terms of like they are able to withstand that workload and they're good carriers of the ball. And then getting James White back is huge. And then if you get literally any value out of Pierre Strong, I think they're for sure a C plus group, if not better. So I think I kind of agree with moving them up.
Would you say let's keep them in C plus, or would you even argue for B?
How much credit do you think the offensive line of the Patriots?
Well, a lot of credit. Yeah, that's probably
definitely some, but also to Aaron's point, like teams were playing the run because they're, the Patriots weren't going to blow the top off of anybody. So I think that probably like counterbalances itself. To me, they're probably better than a couple of the B teams, but not necessarily enough of them to where like I feel super strongly about moving them there. So definitely C plus. Maybe B if we talk through some of the more B teams.
And another team I was just tricky to place, so I stuck them in C because I figure they don't have very many fans, so who cares? The Detroit Lions. I happen to like DeAndre Swift, and I think we all like Jamal Williams as sort of like the leadership guy and the great interview guy and things like that. But it was hard to tell. The one thing that team could do really well was run the ball between the tackles, and I didn't know how much that was the running back, the scheme, the fact that opponents were like, yeah, go run the ball. We're going to win anyway, or where to place that running back core.
I think I'm fine with Detroit as a C. Yeah, I agree. I mean, especially like DeAndre Swift is good, but he's never been healthy. And also, I just don't think he's ever going to be a lead back. That's why they have Jamal Williams there. Yeah. I will say I do like Jamar Jefferson as a third back. Yeah, I think he's really good, but that's obviously not going to move the needle here.
C minus. I'm going to start with the Los Angeles Rams, who, if you talk about guys who are never healthy, Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, both of whom look great in like spurts, but they're never healthy. I don't see a lot of reliability from either of them. And they're in an offense where a running back should be successful. And a lot of times the success turns into, 10 carries for 47 yards. Like if you're really good in this offense, you should be doing more than that.
I think if you told me both guys would be healthy for 17 games, I think this is a B group. However, we have never seen either of them do that. And I worry that they're not going to be able to do that again. So if they do, great. That would obviously be a huge boon for this Rams team, especially because they're probably going to regress in some areas. That's just how it goes. But yeah, these guys are not going to be healthy enough, and they haven't been to this point, so it's just tough.
Also in the C minuses, we have the Houston Texans with the scourge of the Chargers, Rex Burkhead, still in the NFL, along with Marlon Mack, who was this Indianapolis Colts binky guy for a couple of years until they said, "Oh, Jonathan Taylor, okay, that's right. We're not going to mess with Marlon Mack anymore." And I think I kept him at C- and not a D because I'm a big fan of Damien Pierce. He's a real smash mouth guy.
To me, he's actually really similar to like Mike Davis, who we brought up earlier, but just like better, and obviously doesn't have, thousands of carries of hits worth of, stacked up at him at this point. So I think basically whatever you think of the Texans running back room is like 90% just hinges on what you think of Damien Pierce.
He's got to be.
So I'm going to say he's a draft pick. We don't know anything about what he's going to do in the NFL. He didn't stand out on Backcast like Breece Hall did. I'm going to argue that they should drop to D. Derrik, what do you think? C- or D?
I think I'd probably move them down because I think there's at least one D team that I prefer over them. So I would probably put them down to D.
If you guys run into Pierce, man, I don't know what to tell you. Two other teams. The Carolina Panthers. Tell me about Christian McCaffrey. Tell me a bedtime story, Grandpa, about Christian McCaffrey and back when he was good.
I think healthy Christian McCaffrey is good. It's just, when was the last time he was healthy? Basically never. And, at this point, you have to wonder not only like, is he going to get hurt again? It's just like, what percentage of himself is he at this point after years of injury? Like, is he 85%? Is that really good enough? Like, I don't know. It's just, and I don't really care for any of the guys behind him.
Yeah, I guess I would argue to raise them because I think McCaffrey is still pretty damn good, but there's just too much injury question about him, and there is nothing behind him.
I might raise them to C. It's just, the injury precedent is like probably as bad as anybody at the position right now.
They have Donta Foreman now too, and he played well down the stretch for a few games. But again, C-Mac comes back and he's like he's Rex Burkhead, he'll be better than Rex Burkhead, but he's just that guy. The other C- team is the San Francisco 49ers. Again, they have guys who I think are system guys, and that's why they're down at C-.
My only question about that would be, if we're counting use check, should they be higher?
I think if we count use check, they should definitely be higher. But I agree with like the running backs, system thing. Like, none of these guys really stand out.
They're probably on any other team. They're just dudes.
Yeah, on any other team, you put them in like Miami and like they get 200 yards a year. Who cares? But if we do add use check, I might bump him up because that dude, he's probably the best fullback of my lifetime.
JP wanted to put use check at wide receiver last week to move them up.
Yeah, I think he counts as a running back. I think he counts as a running back, and I think that moves San Francisco up.
But we have a couple teams at D. I'll start with the Atlanta Falcons because I think Patterson is a good player and was a fun story. He's not this outstanding running back. And the names of the other guys on the roster escape me right now, but I don't remember being blown away by them. Mike Davis is obviously gone.
They have Damian Williams, who I thought played fairly well in Chicago last year, but like not enough to where you're getting excited about anything. Right. And then they drafted Tyler Algier out of BYU, who is like a huge bruiser, but also like, what is a 5th round rookie really going to do for you? Like, that probably shouldn't move the needle if you're trying to rank them. So I think D is probably fine. And when you compare them to all the other rooms, like they don't stack up.
Patterson is a nice athlete, and it shows the issue with the running back position, which is that these guys are all good, but somebody has to be below average. And Atlanta is one of them.
You grab a longtime kick returner and you stick him at tailback, and he's as good as anybody else. That's the Patterson story in a nutshell. Well, somebody who has to be D, I mentioned them a moment ago, the New York Giants, because we're done. I hope we're done pretending Saquon is going to bounce back and be anything but like a guy. And he's being backed up right now by Matt Breida and Gary Brightwell, who is just one of these sort of third down guys that you grab in the middle rounds.
I think too with Saquon, it's not even just the injuries piling up at this point. I just feel like there's something like he just has to get out of that organization. Like, it just feels like something there is stale. It's not working. It's not ever going to work. I don't know if he'll ever be good again on some other team, but like, I feel like if he's going to be good again, it won't be in New York.
There's a little bit of, how are we going to focus everything around you when you're healthy with him? And it winds up being, let's run you off tackle a lot. Like, that's our big solution to this problem behind a weak offensive line. And, that's probably going to change now because I think they have a better regime.
Yeah, Daboll's going to have different solutions to the problem, but they're probably going to be minimizing Barkley.
Yeah, that regime is like, let's just amortize what's left of your contract right now. That's their thought on this. The last of the D teams is my favorite team to make fun of during these tier lists, unfortunately, the Chicago Bears. David Montgomery is another guy who is like, oh, he's flashed this potential when healthy. He's healthy here, he's healthy there. The offensive line is always bad. Backing up is Khalil Herbert, Darrytown Evans.
Montgomery breaks a lot of tackles. He has a surprisingly good Kubiak projection compared to average draft position. Their offensive line sucked last year, which Derrik knows because he was writing the chapter and I edited the unit comments where he wrote about how bad it was. I would move Chicago up to C- because it's their offensive line that is holding him back.
I agree. And honestly, it's not even just Montgomery. I actually kind of think Khalil Herbert is like a really good second guy. He's not somebody who's necessarily going to like create many explosive plays, but I think he's in a similar mold to Montgomery where he's fairly shifty for a guy his size. He can still take a fair amount of hits, and his vision actually impressed me despite like how bad the offensive line was and how few chances he really got to prove how good his vision was. But I think as a number 2, he's really good. And then Montgomery, if he's healthy, I think is a really good back. It's just, that offensive line is, I've written enough about it that I don't even want to talk about it.
Now let's boost up to C+ and move upwards.
So these are committees plus. I'm going to start with the Los Angeles Chargers, Austin Eckler, and all the goofballs that they have behind Austin Eckler, starting with Isaiah Spiller, the rookie, and they have Justin Jackson there, Larry Roundtree, et cetera, et cetera.
If I believed in any of those guys behind Eckler, I would move them up, but it's Eckler and a bunch of dudes.
I will say, like, Eckler, even as recently as like 2 years ago, I was kind of a skeptic. I didn't think he was that good between the tackles. I thought he was more of like a slightly better than James White, but I actually think over the past couple of years, last year in particular, he's done a really good job being able to take hits. His vision between the tackles has gotten so much better. He's like a legitimate workhorse back now, which I don't think was true a couple of years ago.
Next up, a more controversial choice, I think, the Buffalo Bills.
Controversial because most people would expect them to be lower.
And I know that we tend to be higher on them because when you really dig into the metrics and dig into the tape, Singletary looks very good. But then, you actually just look at the results, and the results, for a variety of reasons, just aren't impressive.
Partly because they just pass the ball a lot, and they don't run that much. And in particular, for fantasy purposes, they hand the ball to Allen. Allen runs the ball at the goal line. Singletary is another guy who breaks tackles like Montgomery. I might lower Buffalo to C, but I get it. People like James Cook a lot.
What I would say about James Cook, we've been doing this thing with all the rookies of like, we don't want to project too much. I will say, at least with Cook, he fills such a clear role on the team that probably provides value. He's very clearly going to be their pass catcher, which they didn't have, I don't think. So yeah. I think that's nice. The thing that makes Buffalo the trickiest to me is just like, they clearly didn't even care about having an interesting run game until like week 13. So it was honestly hard to like even judge what those guys were doing in the rushing offense until they started doing more pulling stuff, getting under center a little bit more, actually trying to have a run game. And then Singletary looked really good. So if they do more of that, I'm actually kind of fine with this ranking. It's just, I don't know if they're going to again. It's like a child eating their vegetables. It's like, we know we have to do it. We don't want to do it.
Another C.
Speaking of a child eating their vegetables.
And Andy Reid, combination of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and other Clyde Edwards-Helaire, otherwise known as Ronald Jones, two guys who you're like, based on their scouting reports and their measurables and everything, should be fabulous, and then you don't get a lot of results on the field.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, is like good. He's just not as good as the first round pick, which is like the problem that he's kind of run into at this point. Ronald Jones, I'm on the other end. I don't think he's any good at all. I'm so done with Ronald Jones.
I feel like the Kansas City running backs are nothing special. I'd drop them.
I might drop them too. Like I do think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is good, but he's not any like special kind of good, like you said. Like he's just like a slightly above average.
The Raiders.
Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake.
Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake. So good push-pull there. You got Zamir White, another Georgia running back, coming in, who does a lot of things Josh Jacobs does. And don't forget the incomparable Brandon Bolden from the Patriots coming in to provide all of that leadership and special teams ability.
I know Jacobs wasn't as good last year as he has been at certain points, but I think a lot of that had to do with the offensive line was just like really, really bad. I mean, like Alex Leatherwood did not have a good rookie year. They obviously lost Rodney Hudson at center, so that was kind of a problem. Like they just weren't that good on the interior, and I think that hurt him a lot. If they get any degree of better at run blocking, on top of, I think, Josh McDaniels being a good just offensive play caller and stuff, I think Jacobs can be pretty good again. So I think this is a good tier for them.
Yeah, I'm good with them here.
And since we already mentioned Ronald Jones, my last C+ team are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So this depends on how you really feel about Lenny.
Leonard Fournette, I think, is definitely better than what we remember at the end of Jacksonville. I mean, at the end of Jacksonville, he was like not an NFL caliber player, basically. But he's like quietly been like pretty good in Tampa Bay, and he's like learned how to catch passes, which is a new thing that nobody thought he would do. So I think he's like a fine starting running back, and they have some other guys. So
awesome. So when we go to B, if C stood for committee, B stood for big name. So these are teams that sort of like you got a big name for the most part. There's a few exceptions, and we're going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals. We have a big name in Joe Mixon, who I think is an effective back, and a bunch of guys behind him, Perrine and some others who are replacement level dudes.
Yeah, I'm good with them here.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I mean, I think this is pretty perfect for them.
No notes. All right. Next, B for big name, the Minnesota Vikings, with our big name Dalvin Cook and his backup.
Yeah, a year ago I would have put them higher, but surprisingly disappointing performance, I think, numbers-wise, from Cook and Madison last year. So I'm fine with them here.
Well, Cook is entering that point in his career where he just starts becoming a guy.
He's just been broken down too many times. I just don't think he has quite the explosiveness that he used to. So some of the big plays that you were getting just aren't there. So I think B is probably fine. Still really good, just not quite what he used to be.
B for big name. There's a few names bigger than Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas, but they're only really here because Tony Pollard, his committee back, is a very strong 1B, or he's the 1A, honestly. So combined, it's a pretty solid backfield.
I know I'm higher on Zeke than everybody here. I think if Zeke is healthy, they would be A, but I think because we don't know he's going to be healthy, I think they have to be B. He's the best pass protector in the league. He's actually a really good pass catcher. He's just obviously not as explosive as Pollard. You know, Pollard's better in space, but Zeke is like a pretty capable pass catcher. And then I think between the tackles, he just does such a good job of not ruining plays and like getting the most out of stuff. So I think that's actually why he's a great fit with Pollard. Like they're just so complementary of each other. So I like it.
Green Bay Packers, Aaron Jones, and a very capable backup in A.J. Dillon.
This is the one I might move to A.
Okay. I think I'm with moving them
Dillon
to A
is really
well,
good.
because I think they can both be the lead back there. Like if one went down for whatever reason, I think they could both get 20 touches a game. I mean, A.J. Dillon, like he should be starting somewhere. It's just that he happens to share a room with Aaron Jones, who's also a Pro Bowler.
Some love for the Green Bay Packers. This one was my hardest one. The New Orleans Saints with Alvin Kamara, who we don't know his legal status, and Mark Ingram behind him. So that was kind of like between their big names. Ingram just keeps on kind of going. And, so here they are at B. Go after
Kamara was terrible by DYAR last year. It was worst running back in the league at running. Yet I still feel like he's dangerous.
I think a lot of that was like the offensive line was really bad and they couldn't push the ball down the field. It was similar to the Patriots problem where like the team, they couldn't throw the ball down the field, especially when they had the injuries at quarterback. So it was like, of course teams are just going to be able to key in on Kamara, and they didn't have Michael Thomas. It was like, who else were defenses afraid of but Alvin Kamara? So I think, if they can get normal again, Alvin Kamara will be really good. And then like Mike said, somehow Mark Ingram is like a really good number 2.
More B's. Big name, Najee Harris, Pittsburgh Steelers. I think is a heck of a back who's behind a pretty weak, borderline terrible offensive line with no quarterback. And I think he could be a heck of a player.
Yeah, I'm fine with that argument. I'm not a great big fan of Benny Snell or Anthony McFarland or the guys behind him, but
but I also do think like that is less of a concern considering Harris can like take 30 touches a game and he can catch and he can pass protect. Like he can do all the things that you would typically ascribe to the backup. And
now we have some teams that have a bunch of guys, but they're a bunch of good guys. We're going to start with the Washington Commanders with the combination of Antonio Gibson, J.D. McCaskick, rookie Brian Robinson out of Alabama, Jared Patterson, that little bowling ball out of Buffalo. And I think that's a pretty good combination of receivers, power backs, versatile backs that pushes them up to a B for me.
I don't feel like they're any different from the Patriots.
Yeah, I don't think I could have them in a higher tier than the Patriots. They're probably more of a C+ to me. I think I'm also just lower on Antonio Gibson, which is probably the biggest thing for me. And then the other thing that would theoretically move the needle is a rookie, Brian Robinson.
Right. If you look at it like McKissick is similar to James White, Gibson, it really isn't any better than Damian Harris. A rookie versus Ramondre Stevenson, they seem pretty similar. So if we're going to have the Patriots as a C+, I think we have to have Washington as a C+.
Sorry, Commanders fans. But Eagles fans, I will die on these hills, and I'll die on the B hill for Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott, and a team that ran for well over 2,000 yards last year with the help of their quarterback, yes.
And the offensive line.
And a great offensive line anchored by Jason Kelce. but I got the Eagles in the B tier.
I think they're good players. It's just like last year, I think Sirianni literally did not know what to do with him for the first 2 months of the year. And I think that kind of spoiled our perception of a lot of these guys. But I think once they started to figure it out, it was like, oh, Miles Sanders is actually, he can be a lead back. Oh, Kenneth Gainwell is a really good number 2. Oh, even Boston Scott is still like a really interesting third guy. So I think B is totally fine.
Yes. So we'll start with the first of the A tier team. So the build drama, the Denver Broncos with our boy Javonte, with Melvin Gordon at number 2. And he's a guy who, when you fit him in at number 2 and you're only paying him $2.3 million or whatever a year, he's really good there. And Mike Boone is a very good number 3. I mean, maybe he's just a replacement level guy, but if you look at him, he's always averaging 5.5 yards a carry, or, getting 5 carries for 40 yards in relief. That's a great 1-2-3 punch right there.
I'd want to see Javonte Williams doing it a little bit more before I put them in A. I would put them in B, but I know people are pretty strong believers in him.
Oddly enough, I actually do agree kind of with the skepticism is probably like too harsh of a word, but just like a little more wait and see with Javonte Williams. I'm actually with that, but I think I'm also higher on Melvin Gordon. Obviously, he's like a decent number 2 runner, but also he's just like a really, really good pass protector. And for me, that kind of matters a lot. So I just think they have like this insane 1-2 punch.
A tier, probably no surprise here, the Cleveland Browns with Hunt and Chubb. And that kid was really awesome on Thursday night last year, Dearness Johnson.
Yes, I would leave them here. I would not put them in the S, but they are absolutely an A.
Not that like Chubb or Hunt are bad pass catchers, but it doesn't feel like they have like a specialist in that regard. So that would kind of be what would hold me back.
I think Hunt is more of the pass catcher. He's not like a James White, but he's more of the pass catcher type of guy.
Exactly.
Now, in the A tier, more or less, out of respect, he remains in the A tier, although I have gone on record saying that he is Kentucky Fried Chicken at this point.
Yeah, it's a really tough one, because if you go by what we think is possible that's going to happen to him this year, they would be a B.
Right.
But if you only go by how he's actually performed over the last 3 years, they're definitely an A.
Right. And I'm not a big Hassan Hankins fan as the rookie backup. And, so there wasn't anything to do that. But again, Derrick Henry, A. The S tier is no surprise. You got Jonathan Taylor there. I'm a big fan of Nyheim Hines as your number 2, just in case something goes wrong. He's your pass catcher who can come out and do things. Got a couple other guys on the bench there, but it's really about Taylor.
Yeah, I would think that if Taylor got hurt, Philip Lindsay would take his job more than Hines would. Hines does his thing. He does his Nyheim Hines thing.
I think Lindsay is a better runner. It's just he's so tiny, you can't do it for 20 carries a game. You'd
have to give some of Taylor's carries to Hines, but
yeah.
I don't think Hines would suddenly take all of Taylor's work. I think
because they want Hines splitting out. They want him catching passes.
The Colts are definitely S tier, though. Taylor was super ridiculously special last year, and Hines is good. I'm good with it as is.
Yeah, I think so.